For centuries, gardeners and scientists knew a secret that modern agriculture wants you to forget. Hit a seed with a microdose of electricity, not enough to feel, barely enough to measure, and it doesn't just wake up, it explodes into growth. Seeds sprout days sooner, roots grow 30% longer, germination rates double, and the entire process requires nothing more than 2 pieces of metal, a damp towel, and the same voltage you'd find in a watch battery. But this technique vanished from mainstream gardening nearly a century ago, buried beneath an industry that now sells seeds coated in vivid pinks and blues, chemical treatments laced with neonicotinoid insecticides that devastate pollinators while generating billions in annual revenue. If electrified seeds work as claimed, if simple physics can replace toxic chemistry, why was this knowledge really forbidden? Why don't garden centers sell electric seed starters? Why do we coat seeds in poisons instead of giving them a harmless electrical nudge? And what happens when you try this yourself on your kitchen counter with materials you already own? This is the story of a technology so effective it threatened an entire industry, a method so simple it couldn't be patented, and a truth so buried that most modern gardeners have never heard the name of the man who proved it worked nearly 300 years ago. Welcome to Veiled Earth, where we dig up what they want forgotten. The priest who saw seeds differently. In the spring of 1747, inside a quiet laboratory in Paris, Abbé Jean-Antoine Nollet set 2 pewter pots side by side on a wooden bench. Each held identical black earth, each received the same handful of mustard seeds. Both sat in the same room, measured by the same Réaumur thermometer to ensure identical temperature. But only one pot would change history. Nollet wasn't a farmer or a botanist. He was a physicist and a Catholic priest, one of the Enlightenment's most curious minds, devoted to understanding electricity at a time when most people still associated it with parlor tricks and static shocks from wool coats. He had a hypothesis that seemed absurd. Plants might respond to electrical current in ways no one had ever measured. Not lightning strikes or dramatic jolts, but controlled, sustained exposure to gentle voltage. For his experiment, Nollet designed a protocol that would satisfy the most skeptical colleague. 2 identical vessels, identical soil, identical seeds, identical environmental conditions. The only variable. One pot would receive daily electrical treatment through metal probes inserted into the soil. Every day for hours at a time, Nollet sent controlled pulses of electricity through the charged vessel. The current wasn't strong, just enough to create a measurable field around the seeds. The other pot remained untouched, serving as his baseline control. He tracked every variable meticulously. Temperature readings 4 times daily, moisture levels checked and equalized. Even the position of the pots was rotated to rule out differences in sunlight or air circulation. After 3 days, something extraordinary happened. The electrified seeds broke the surface. Green shoots appeared, 3 lines high in the old French measurement system. The control pot showed nothing, just dark soil, undisturbed. Nollet recorded the observation without interpretation, just facts. Just measurements, just the discipline of proper experimental method. By the 8th day, the difference was undeniable. Every seed in the electrified vessel had germinated, reaching heights of 15 or 16 lines. The control pot, by comparison, showed only 2 or 3 weak seedlings, barely 4 lines tall. Nollet presented his findings to the French Academy of Sciences in meticulous detail, not just the results, but the exact conditions, hours of exposure, soil type, vessel material, the use of identical containers to eliminate hidden variables. His colleagues took notice, and the news spread quickly through European scientific circles. When science said, "This is real," the experiment's impact was immediate and profound. Translations appeared in journals across France, Britain, and the German states. Other experimenters rushed to replicate Nollet's protocol. In Geneva, Jean Yellowbird repeated the experiment with hyacinth and narcissus bulbs, observing earlier blooms and accelerated growth. The pattern held across species and geographies. Joseph Priestley, the brilliant chemist who would later discover oxygen, included Nollet's results in his comprehensive history and present state of electricity. This wasn't fringe science or amateur speculation. This was work being validated by the leading minds of the age. And in 1777, the Royal Society of London, the most prestigious scientific institution in the world, made a declaration that should have changed agriculture forever. Electricity's effect on plant germination is proven. Not promising, not interesting, proven. based on reproducible experiments conducted according to rigorous standards across multiple countries by independent researchers. This was as close to scientific consensus as the 18th century could produce. The effect was real. The mechanism remained mysterious, but the results were undeniable. So what happened? Why isn't every seed packet today sold with simple electrical treatment instructions? Why did this proven science vanish from mainstream practice? The answer begins with what happened when the Victorian era tried to scale Knowledge's discovery and discovered something troubling about consistency and control. The electric gardens of Victorian England. By the 1840s, Victorian Britain was drunk on invention. Steam engines, telegraphs, gas lighting. Electricity itself was transitioning from laboratory curiosity to practical tool, and the garden became a stage for electrical experimentation on a scale Knowledge never imagined. Drawing inspiration from the Royal Society's validation, amateur experimenters and professional horticulturists began wiring their gardens like early power grids. Copper lines strung overhead on wooden frames, crude batteries connected to metal stakes driven into soil, lightning collectors, strange rake-like antennas designed to capture atmospheric electricity and channel it directly into the earth. The Royal Horticultural Society received breathless reports. Cabbages and wheat grown beneath electrified wires, roses blooming weeks ahead of schedule, strawberries ripening well before midsummer. Provincial newspapers ran stories of country gentlemen covering their vegetable beds with metallic grids, hoping for earlier peas or giant carrots. The English Mechanic and World of Science published columns on the latest electroculture devices, promising readers that even the smallest kitchen garden could become a site of scientific progress. One widely circulated story told of a potato patch in Kent that, after a season under electrified wires, yielded enough tubers to stagger the local market. The tale spread through agricultural shows and county fairs, inspiring dozens of imitations. But then came the contradictions. For every gardener who swore by electrified plots, another found no difference at all. Agricultural societies organized competitions and demonstrations, but rarely produced detailed yield tables or proper controls. The few attempts at rigorous field trials produced inconsistent results. Some plots showed modest gains, others showed none. A few even lagged behind their controls. Patents for electroculture apparatus appeared in trade journals, devices claiming to harness atmospheric electricity or deliver gentle current to soil. But these inventions rarely moved beyond agricultural fairs and catalog pages. By the end of the century, the electric garden had become a symbol of both hope and frustration, an idea that refused to die but never quite delivered the miracle it promised. What the Victorians didn't understand, what Knowledge himself could only glimpse, was that electricity affects seeds within an extremely narrow window. Too little voltage, nothing happens. Too much, and you damage the very processes you're trying to enhance. The dose matters, the timing matters, and without understanding the mechanism at the cellular level, consistency was impossible. That understanding would have to wait another century for modern biology to reveal what actually happens inside a seed when you give it that perfect electrical nudge. What electricity actually does to seeds. Every seed is a fortress designed to protect life until conditions are perfect. The outer coat, tough, waxy, nearly impermeable, keeps the delicate embryo inside safe from premature awakening. Beneath that coat lies a membrane that acts like a locked door. It regulates what comes in, what stays out, and when the whole miraculous process of germination can begin. Normally, when you soak a seed, water takes hours to seep through that tough outer barrier. Enzymes inside, especially amylase, remain dormant until enough moisture and warmth signal that it's safe to proceed. Amylase converts stored starch into sugar, fueling the first explosive burst of growth. But this system is slow by design. It's biological insurance, preventing the seed from waking up during a brief rain followed by killing frost. Introducing a weak electric field changes everything. When a seed sits between two different metals, copper and zinc, for example, on a damp, slightly salty surface, it exists within a gentle voltage gradient, usually around 0.8 to 1.0 volts. Not enough to shock, not enough to burn, barely enough to measure. But at the microscopic level, profound effects occur. The electrical field subtly alters the properties of the seed coat and the membrane beneath it. In some cases, it creates what scientists call transient pores, temporary openings in the cellular barrier. This process is called electroporation, and it's used in modern genetics labs to insert DNA into cells. These fleeting openings allow water and dissolved ions to flow in more quickly, bypassing the natural resistance the seed evolved to protect itself. The result? The seed hydrates faster, and once water floods in, the internal machinery activates ahead of schedule. Amylase, previously on standby, begins working immediately. Starch granules dissolve into sugars. The radicle, the first root, pushes outward days before it would under normal conditions. Laboratory studies on various crops show consistent patterns. When the electric field is kept within that narrow window, under 1 volt, applied for several hours, the effects are reliably positive. Higher germination rates, often 80 to 100% vs 50 to 70% for controls. Faster sprouting, 24 to 48 hours earlier on average. More vigorous early growth, roots 30 to 50% longer at the 72-hour mark. But if the field is too strong or exposure too long, benefits vanish or damage occurs. The dose window is critical. This is a nudge, not a jolt. The science behind this rests on basic physics and biochemistry. A galvanic cell, two dissimilar metals in a moist, ionic environment, generates steady low-voltage current, the same principle behind early batteries. But here, the energy flows through the seed's own tissues, influencing ion channels and signaling molecules at the membrane level. These channels, in turn, trigger the cascade of events leading to germination. The precise molecular pathways are still being mapped, but the pattern is clear. Electricity at the right dose acts as a biological accelerator. This isn't about brute force or high technology. The entire effect depends on gentle, continuous exposure at voltages nature itself produces during thunderstorms, just enough to coax biochemistry into action without overwhelming it. Understanding this mechanism transforms a centuries-old curiosity into something testable, replicable, and actionable. The next step: translating these principles into a method anyone can try at home. The kitchen counter protocol. You don't need a laboratory. You don't need specialized equipment. You need materials sitting in your kitchen drawer right now. Materials: non-metal dish, plastic or ceramic, paper towels, table salt, copper strip, old penny, wire, plumbing fitting, zinc strip, galvanized washer, roofing nail, flashing, seeds, radish, lettuce, basil work well, optional. Digital multimeter to verify voltage. Setup: lay a single layer of paper towel in the dish, moisten it until damp but not dripping. Sprinkle a pinch of table salt and swirl it in. The salt dissolves, turning the towel into an electrolyte conductor. Place your copper electrode on one side. Opposite it, place the zinc electrode. Critical: they must face each other but never touch. Keep them 2 to 3 centimeters apart, about the width of your thumb. If they touch, the circuit shorts and the effect disappears. This gap is essential. Between the metals, space 10 to 20 seeds evenly on the damp towel. Press them gently so each makes contact with the moisture. The paper should stay damp throughout, never soaked. This is your charging chamber. Copper serves as the positive pole. Zinc as negative. No shocks, no burning, just a steady microcurrent of 0.8 to 1.0 volts. Enough to nudge chemistry without harm. Verification: if you have a multimeter, verify the voltage. Red probe to copper, black probe to zinc. You should read between 0.8 and 1.0 volts. If it reads 0, check that metals aren't touching and the towel is still damp. If voltage is low, add a drop of water or a bit more salt. This confirms electrons are moving. The same principle that powered early batteries and powers your phone today, just at vastly different scales. Timing: once the field is stable, leave the setup undisturbed for 4 to 8 hours. Overnight often works perfectly. Don't move the tray. Don't let the towel dry out. In dry conditions, cover loosely with plastic wrap to slow evaporation. The seeds absorb water and voltage together, beginning the metabolic shift that breaks dormancy. Testing the effect: after 6 hours, you can test whether amylase has activated. Take a few treated seeds and a few untreated controls. Crush each on a white dish and add a drop of iodine solution, available at pharmacies. Where starch remains, iodine turns blue-black. Where amylase has begun breaking down starch, the stain is lighter, more brown. The difference is subtle but visible, a chemical fingerprint of awakening. Measuring results: to properly track outcomes, record germination at 24, 48, and 72 hours. Measure root length, the radical, Compare to an identical control batch treated only with water. The data will reveal whether your specific combination of metals, salt concentration, and timing created the effect Knowledge observed in the Royal Society validated. Safety. This method is remarkably safe, but follow basic precautions. Never use mains electricity, never let metals touch, keep setup away from children and pets, use only untreated, unpainted metals, dispose of zinc properly, don't ingest. The voltage is low, the risks minimal, but the method demands care and attention to detail. What the numbers actually show. Theory is interesting, data is convincing. Here's what happens when you run the experiment properly with measurements recorded at every stage. Treated group, copper, zinc, 6 hours, 0, 9 volts, 20 radish seeds on electrolyte dampened towel, first germination, 28 hours. At 48 hours, 18 seeds sprouted, average root length 1.7 centimeters. At 72 hours, 100% germination, tallest seedling 4.2 centimeters. Control group, water only, no metals. 20 identical radish seeds on plain dampened towel, first germination, 41 hours. At 48 hours, 9 seeds sprouted, average root length 0.8 centimeters. At 72 hours, 60% germination, tallest seedling 2.1 centimeter. The differences aren't subtle. 13-hour head start on first germination, 2x more seeds sprouted at 48-hour mark. Root length more than double, 1.7 centimeters vs 0.8 centimeters. Final germination rate 100% vs 60%. Seedling height exactly double at 72 hours. These outcomes echo historical claims with measurable precision. Quicker emergence, higher germination rates, accelerated early growth. The numbers speak for themselves, offering clear metrics independent of theory or reputation. This is what Knowledge saw in 1747, what the Royal Society validated in 1777, what Victorian gardeners glimpsed but couldn't consistently replicate, and what modern agriculture chose to bury beneath chemical coatings. The seeds they sell you now. Walk into any garden center today and look at the seed packets. Notice the colors: vivid pinks, electric blues, neon greens. Those colors aren't decoration, they're warnings. Each seed is coated with a chemical payload designed to protect crops from pests and disease during their vulnerable first weeks. The primary compounds: neonicotinoids, systemic insecticides that permeate every cell of the growing plant, and synthetic fungicides that prevent soil pathogens from attacking emerging seedlings. For the seed industry, these coatings represent more than plant protection. They represent business model protection. Every coating formula can be patented. The recipe can be tweaked each season, ensuring that this year's seeds are a unique, proprietary blend different from last year's. Farmers and gardeners buy fresh packets every season, each one a recurring purchase in a carefully managed cycle. The economics are elegant. A patented coating locks in customers and justifies premium pricing. The formula is exclusive, enforceable, and profitable at industrial scale. Unlike a kitchen table galvanic plate, the recipe for chemical seed treatment can be owned, regulated, and monetized. The logic of the market favors what can be patented, not what can be improvised at home. Meanwhile, the environmental cost is quietly absorbed. Neonicotinoids persist in soil, leach into groundwater, and disrupt pollinator populations. Honeybees and wild insects struggle to navigate fields treated with these compounds. Studies linked colony collapse disorder directly to neonicotinoid exposure. Entire bee populations have vanished in agricultural regions where treated seeds are standard practice. The story of colored seed coatings isn't one of outright suppression, it's structural neglect. Open source methods like electrical priming offer no patents, no annual contracts, no easy revenue capture. In a system built on proprietary solutions, the simplest techniques are left at the margins, unmarketed, unprotected, gradually forgotten. Why this science became forbidden? The suppression of electric seed treatment wasn't a conspiracy in the dramatic sense. No midnight raids, no book burnings, just economic logic operating quietly over decades. Here's the problem electroculture posed to emerging agricultural industries. It couldn't be patented. The principle is basic physics: galvanic cells generating voltage through dissimilar metals. You can't patent a law of nature. You can't own the fact that copper and zinc create current in saltwater. It required no recurring purchases, Once you understand the principle, you can replicate it with materials that cost pennies. No annual seed coating fees. No proprietary formulations to license. It was too simple to control. Anyone with basic materials could test it, verify it, and share results. The method spreads horizontally through communities, not vertically through corporate channels. It threatened established revenue streams. If electrical treatment works as claimed, chemical seed coatings become unnecessary. That's billions in annual revenue suddenly at risk. So the knowledge didn't need to be actively suppressed. It just needed to be ignored. Not taught in agricultural programs. Not mentioned in extension service bulletins. Not researched with the funding that chemical alternatives received. Over time, absence becomes forgetting. And forgetting becomes. This was never proven, even when the Royal Society declared it proven in 1777. The method wasn't forbidden by law. It was forbidden by economics. By a system that rewards patentable complexity over open-source simplicity. And that's exactly why you've never heard of Abbé Nollet or his mustard seeds, or the Victorian electric gardens or the basic physics that makes it all work. Not because it failed, because it succeeded in ways that couldn't be monetized. The power sitting in your kitchen drawer. Right now, you have everything needed to test 300 years of buried science. 2 pieces of metal, a damp towel, a pinch of salt, seeds. That's it. That's the entire method that agricultural chemistry spent a century burying beneath patented formulations and toxic coatings. While modern agriculture sells dependence in neon-colored packages, a 1-volt current still triples germination speed and growth. No patents, no poisons, no recurring fees, just physics. As neonicotinoids devastate pollinator populations worldwide and chemical seed treatments generate billions in annual profit, the power to rewrite that story sits in your hands right now. Not a corporation's hands. Yours. The experiment takes 1 evening. The materials cost less than a single seed packet. The results are measurable within 48 hours. And if it works, if your treated seeds sprout faster, grow stronger, and germinate more reliably, then you'll know something that modern agriculture desperately wants you to forget. The most powerful agricultural technologies are often the simplest. The ones that can't be owned. The ones that work with nature instead of replacing it. The ones that cost nothing and last forever. Abbé Nollet knew this in 1747. The Royal Society confirmed it in 1777. Victorian gardeners glimpsed it in their electrified plots. And now, nearly 300 years later, you can prove it on your kitchen counter tonight. Because sometimes the future of food isn't a secret. It's just waiting for someone to wake it up. This is Veiled Earth, where we remember what they buried. If this experiment changes what you believe about seeds, agriculture, or what corporations tell you is necessary, subscribe. Share this with someone who still thinks chemical coatings are the only option. Because every person who shocks a seed with copper and zinc becomes a little harder to sell dependency to. Every kitchen counter that proves Nollet right is evidence the system lied. The technology isn't forbidden by law, it's just forgotten by design. What would you grow if nothing held you back?